There is something going on at Joyce Meyer Ministries that no one saw coming. Joyce disappeared from Dyer TV in 2025 after being on the network for 20 years. The official explanation was kept secret, but leaked papers suggest a different picture. This time, the accusations are more serious than just money. Her ministry is trying to find new channels quickly because their audience has dropped a much. People who know think this could be the end of the line. The woman who developed a $100 million empire is now going through her worst time. What exactly went down at Dyer? Pauline Joyce Hutcherson was born on June 4, 1943, in South St. Louis. She later changed her name to Joyce Meyer. It was the beginning of World War II, and the city was changing a lot. Her home, on the other hand, felt even heavier. The day she was born, her father, who worked as a machinist, was called up to serve in the war. He went right away and was gone for 3 years. From June 1943 to June 1946. Nothing was the same when he eventually came back inside. Something dark had been etched into him by war. He drank more, talked less, and had a fury that filled every room. Things were already hard financially, and now the emotional burden got heavier. The working class blocks around her might have looked close and steady, but inside her house, there was just stress. The fear that came over her in those early years persisted with her, layer by layer, until it became the foundation of her childhood. As she became older, the hurt inside her father started to show out all around. He drank to get control, and then he abused it. When Joyce was about 5, the rules started to seem weird. The punishments got worse quickly, and the seclusion started. She saw other youngsters, music, play freely while she lived in an environment where even tiny mistakes had big effects. She believes the sexual assault started when she was only 3 years old, in 1946. People didn't know that music dwelt in the walls. Her mother, who was afraid and hurt from her own fights with him, didn't say anything. That quiet music made things worse. Joyce realized early on that no one was coming to aid her, which made her feel stuck in a world she couldn't get out of. At the same time, her mother's strength slowly faded. She was worn down by years of being struck, blamed, and neglected. Joyce was 7 years old when her mother died, and she was living her life without her. She had to deal with her own feelings, her own pain, and the weight of what transpired behind closed doors. There were days when she looked for comfort and couldn't find it. Times when her mom left the room instead of coming in. Every time it happened, Joyce felt like she was losing a little bit of herself. The loneliness changed her, and the pain persisted. But something inside her started to look for a different type of light. When she was 9, she first saw that light. She opened a Bible and started reading it by herself in a little school in South St. Louis in 1952. It felt like a silent door that led to a softer realm. The words about love and forgiveness were like soft hands reaching out to her. She kept reading, and bit by bit she began to feel a new strength come into her life. Then something moved in her heart, and she became a born-again Christian. For a time, she thought it would make the area around her home brighter. But the abuse kept happening the same night she got back from church. Her faith didn't shelter her, it made her feel even more alone because the family still seemed religious from the outside. Nothing changed inside. The abuse happened around once a week for about 10 years. There was so much silence throughout those years from 1952 to 1962 that it almost devoured her. As she got older, the abuse got harsher. Joyce reported later that her father hurt her at least once a week from when she was 10 until she was 18. That made more than 200 events, each of which left a mark that no one else could see. He scared her into silence. He told her lies to make her feel bad. He informed her what would happen if she said something, and she believed him. He also went for other girls in the area. But Joyce was the one who got attacked the most. Everything was set out extremely well. Silence was the key to everything. And the quiet seemed to go on forever. Something far worse came into the scene when she was about 13. Her father started using porn to control her. He made her watch it to mess with her head and break her sense of self. It made her feel weird, humiliated, and different when she was with other youngsters. Schoolwork fell behind. She stopped asking friends over because she knew what he may do. She thought she was worthless by the time she turned 12. Not simply because of what he accomplished, but also because of what he said to her every day. Every insult hurt her thoughts a little bit more. Every threat got worse. And the fact that her mother was quietly suffering in the background only made her feel more alone. The shame, dread, and confusion were like a tightrope around her existence. One of the worst things that happened to her was that her mother didn't say anything. Joyce wanted someone to defend her. But her mother was stuck in her own web of worry. She chose not to say anything since she couldn't stand the shame that would come with it. She finally admitted it years later. She said she couldn't deal with the music scandal. The apology was too late. It couldn't take away the evenings Joyce felt alone in her own home. That quiet taught her the toughest thing she ever learned as a child. Sometimes the person you want to protect you can't. She finally ran when she was 18 in 1961. She left the house with the grief still fresh and the memories still clear. She didn't have much money or actual help. She worked as a secretary at a nearby insurance office and did any job that would help her make ends meet. Fear followed close behind her even after she left home. Years of maltreatment had made her anxious and untrusting. But as soon as she left the house, she was free for the first time. Even if it was unsteady. Her first marriage happened quickly. She was young and needed someone to treat her better. Instead, she wound up with a man she later termed a scam artist. He was lying. He was dishonest. He took something that wasn't his. He left her alone twice. Once in California, I had only a cent and a box of drink bottles. The marriage was hard for 5 years, but it ended in 1966. She went back to her parents' house, which was already full with old memories. She soon married again, expecting for stability, but that marriage again brought emotional storms. These early relationships hurt her, made her bitter and resentful, and made her not know what to do next. She had her first child, Laura, when she was only 22 years old, in 1965. She worked full-time as a bank teller and lived in a small apartment. She didn't have much money to satisfy her basic necessities. Depression slowly took over her life. She felt the weight of old trauma and new obligations on her chest every day. Counseling helped at times, but it never really got to the heart of her pain. She was fighting rage, anxiety, and guilt in her own mind. Some days were so hard that she couldn't even accomplish simple things. But in the thick of all that despair, she slowly began to reach out for religion again. Those tiny actions were the start of her healing and the base of the ministry she would develop in the future, but it took years. In 1976, when Joyce Meyer was 33 years old, something happened that changed her life forever. She was driving to work early in the morning, tired and angry, and praying the same way she had many times before. Then things changed. Later, she said she heard someone shout her name 3 times, clearly and personally, filling her automobile with a presence that shook her. It scared her and made her happy at the same time. She had been a Christian since she was a child. But during those years, she felt hollow, as if she were lost in her own routine. It was a different day. It was like a voice going straight to the parts of her that she kept quiet. That night, she went home feeling almost drunk with the Holy Spirit. She still felt that way. It got into her bones and transformed the way she prayed, read the Bible, and even how she saw herself. It was the moment that changed her from someone who quietly believed to someone who wanted to take action and get help. Not long after this tipping point, she started little. During lunch breaks, she got a few co-workers together and opened a Bible with them. She asked her pastor what to study first, and he told her to get a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. She opened it to John 1 verse 1 and started to lecture from there. There were just 25 or 30 people at start, but they continued coming back every Tuesday night, rain or shine. They loved how she talked about the challenges they had at home and at work. She talked about her personal problems. She was honest while she was trying to learn something hard. The group developed so quickly that she added another session on Thursday afternoons at a friend's house. The second group lasted for 5 years. People attended because the music classes were real, easy, and relevant to their lives. She and her husband had joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri, by the early 1980s. There were only around 30 people in the church, and it was small and having trouble. Joyce started a Bible study for ladies in her house, thinking only a few people would come. Instead, 115 people showed up to the first meeting. It quickly climbed to 500 a week. Pastor Rick Shelton saw her energy and asked her to step in on Sundays. People were deeply moved by her story of surviving abuse. He made her an associate pastor in 1980, which was unusual for a woman at the time. She helped those who had wounds like hers. She also helped lead a 15-minute radio show with Shelton where they talked about how the Bible may help people heal emotionally. That small show set the stage for something far bigger. She started her own radio show called Life in the Word when she was 40 years old in 1983. It started out on just one station in St. Louis, but it expanded quickly. It was soon on 6 stations in the Midwest, reaching people in cities like Chicago and Kansas City. She didn't disguise what she had been through, which made her voice stand out. She talked about being abused without holding back. She talked honestly about fear, humiliation, trauma, and how she learned to breathe again. The show barely lasted 15 minutes, yet it had a big impact on people. Her ratings had gone up by 50% by 1984. For a lot of people who listened, especially ladies who had been hurt. For those 15 minutes, it seemed like someone finally got them. Her truthfulness altered the lives of many people. People wrote to her and said they had never felt seen before. She said that her father raped her at least 200 times between the time she was a youngster and the time she was 18. She didn't tell these stories to scare anyone. She told them to show that it was possible to get better. By the middle of the 1980s, she got hundreds of messages every week from people asking for prayer cassettes, counseling, or just someone to tell them they could make it through another day. Her bravery helped a lot of Christians talk about trauma for the first time. By 1985, she couldn't handle the demand for her employment while still being an associate pastor. She quit her job and started Life in the Word as an independent nonprofit ministry. At first, she ran it from her house. The listeners gave them all the money, which was about $50,000 a year at first. The growth happened quickly. She hired people to work for her. She hired her husband Dave to be the business manager. The crew worked long hours to keep up with letters, tape orders, and requests for music counseling. The ministry was lawfully set up in August 1985, and in May 1986, it got its tax-exempt status. It was little, but the base was strong and personal. She put out her Battlefield of the Mind radio series during this time. Everything changed after that series. She talked about the kinds of fights that most people don't talk about. She talked about sadness, terror, terrible memories, and the things that kept people up at night. More than 10,000 cassettes of that series were sold in 1986 alone. People who listened to the records stated they helped them breathe better, sleep better, and get their minds back under control. The series went on to become one of her most popular works. But in the beginning, all she could do was speak to individuals in dark places where they thought they had to fight alone. Her climb wasn't quiet. In the middle of the 1980s, some religious leaders in the area began to criticize her for talking about wealth. They said she made Christianity sound like a way to become rich. St. Louis newspapers ran stories that questioned her message. They were afraid it would lead people astray, especially those who were already having money problems. As her ministry increased, so did the criticism. Some people said she was pushing a name it and claim it kind of teaching. For decades, the controversies trailed her. But she remained teaching because she thought her message helped people get over their fears. She started working in TV in 1993, when she was 50. She started enjoying everyday life on BT and WGN-TV. It started out as a 30-minute local show. It reached roughly 1 million individuals every month within 2 years. People stopped and listened because of the way she spoke directly. She talked about her own past in a way that made people feel like they weren't alone. By 1997, the show was being broadcast via satellite in 20 different countries. She acted out scenes to help people comprehend trauma. Some stations even stopped airing her show for a period because they thought it was too heavy for kids. She stood by it. She thought that being honest would help. Her ministry kept getting bigger. They moved into a new $20 million headquarters in Fenton, Missouri, in 1997. The money comes from gifts of more than $100 million over time. The new site had a production facility where she could make more than 300 episodes of her show per year. It became the most important part of her work, conveying her message across languages and nations. She kept talking about her personal life in an open way. She told about how she had 3 divorces and how her second marriage ended because of cheating. She used all of her mistakes and scars to make someone else feel better about themselves. Some people didn't like her techniques, but her honesty continued bringing in people who were going through the same thing. She and her husband started the St. Louis Dream Center in 2000. It was 100 acres big and became a haven for those who were poor, addicted, or had been through a lot of tragedy. They helped guys who needed a place to start over by giving them food, lodging, drug recovery programs, and after-school support. Every year, the facility benefited more than 5,000 people. But as this growth happened, people paid more attention. By 2002, the ministry was making $110 million a year from music. There were reports of a $10 million Learjet being utilized for ministry travel and other expensive things. These anecdotes led to discussions about teaching prosperity and being open. Tell Them I Love Them was the first book Joyce Meyer wrote, and it was published in 1986. And she never really stopped once she started. By 2010, she had written more than 100 novels, which is something only a handful Christian authors have ever done. Battlefield of the Mind, her most renowned work, moved in a way that no one saw coming. It sold over 30 million copies around the world and was on Christian bestseller lists for almost 10 years, or more than 500 weeks. She has 5 books in the top rankings at the same time in 2010. Publishers Weekly later said that Battlefield of the Mind had sold more than 2 million copies by 2011, and that number was going up. Her name slowly became one that Christians all across the world knew. And her works made people talk about things that had been hushed previously. In 2011, she published her book Beauty for Ashes, which included more terrible information regarding her father's threats to silence her. She told how the fear of being locked up kept her quiet for years. It wasn't just a testimonial. It made trauma and recovery easier for millions of people to understand. A lot of survivors claimed it gave them strength and made it possible for churches to talk about abuse honestly instead of ignoring it. Her ministry's influence went beyond the church to include big assistance projects. Joyce Meyer Ministries said in 2010 that it had $110.5 million in assets. Her group helped get $5 million worth of food, water, and medical supplies to almost 50,000 people who survived the earthquake in Haiti that year that killed more than 200,000 people. That was just a small fraction of what they did. Her crew built hundreds of homes at Miracle Village, which gave Haitian families a place to live for good. These efforts proved how big of an impact she had, but they also made others wonder. People wanted to know if the money was being utilized wisely, especially because the ministry was so big and needed a strong financial structure. Her ministry became a member of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability in 2009. After the Senate looked into how megachurches spent their money, the ECFA called for tight audits and public openness. More than 90% of the ministry's money went to outreach and humanitarian activity, according to reports. That was how they showed they were working to get better. The certification came in part due of past problems, like buying a $23,000 music marble commode with ministry money. That detail diffused music everywhere and became a sign of disapproval. The ECFA studies did demonstrate, though, that people were being more careful with their money and that salaries and royalties were being changed. Almost 20,000 women went to the Women Arise conference in St. Louis in 2012. Joyce talked about how she had been abused in her first marriage and how Dave, her second husband, helped her heal from years of emotional harm. The gathering shattered the hush about issues that many churches didn't want to talk about. Survivors spoke on panels, and counselors gave practical advice on how to get treatment. It was one of the first times a group that big let people talk about such hard things. Her ministry extended beyond only preaching and holding conferences. She worked with the International Justice Mission in 2015 to stop human trafficking. They saved more than 1,000 victims together. They paid for raids, helped with legal issues, and established safe shelters. Joyce often remarked that her history made her want to protect other people. Every time someone was saved, a youngster or adult finally woke up without terror. These efforts indicated how much misery was lurking in the world and how much her ministry wanted to deal with it. Her YouTube channel had more than 1 million subscribers by 2020. She spoke personal stories there, including the period in her 20s when she almost killed herself. She added that trauma and depression pushed her to the edge until a friend stepped in. People who were feeling the same way as her found comfort in her honesty. Music, it made her one of the few Christian leaders who would talk about mental health, music, without being ashamed. From 2015 to 2020, her ministry covertly paid for 100 adoptions of children who had been abused. They paid for legal bills, offered counseling, and helped families who were adopting. A lot of people never heard these stories, but every adoption was a new start for a child who had been hurt. The ministry didn't talk about this program very often. They just helped when they were needed. But a lot of people were also very critical of her ministry. The St. Louis Post-Music Dispatch published a 4-part story in November 2003 that revealed Joyce made $900,000 a year while Dave made $450,000. It also revealed that donations to the church helped pay for a $2 million home and 4 more residences for another $2 million for their kids. Their main office, which was worth $20 million, was full of furniture worth $5.7 million. The $23,000 marble commode was the thing that stunned everyone the most. A lot of people wanted to know how a ministry that gets more than $100 million in donations every year could spend so much. The criticism was loud and spread quickly. Senator Chuck Grassley started an investigation in 2007 that focused on Joyce and 5 other televangelists. People called them the Grassley Six. The investigation looked at private jets, overseas bank accounts, and expensive things. Joyce Meyer Ministries spent around $100 million a year, so people were quite interested in what they were doing. Joyce's ministry was one of only 2 that did everything that was asked of them. The probe didn't find any unlawful conduct, but it did make the ministry hire additional people to keep an eye on things and be more open with the public. There was more criticism when audits showed that $500,000 had been spent on staff members' cosmetic surgery in 2005. People who didn't appreciate the idea of enhancing someone's image for ministry work felt it sounded like an excuse. In 2009, further reports came in, putting even more pressure on the ministry to explain itself. These events became discussion points for watchdog groups and funders who were concerned that the ministry's ideals were changing. Joyce made roughly $30 million from book sales by 2010. Her income had reduced to $250,000, but her new royalty structure made her more money than she had previously. Some people dubbed it self-enrichment. Some others believed it was fair because the books were her own effort. Still, the ministry lost some donors and had to cut back on some outreach projects for a while. Years of criticism led to significant changes. In 2009, the ministry introduced greater control, produced annual financial reports for music, and made a board where most members were not related to Joyce or Dave. These modifications raised their accountability grade to a C. It wasn't ideal, but it was a step toward a clearer structure. The ministry did not lose its tax-exempt status, and no legal action was taken. Then the Dyer scandal broke. In 2024, journalist Julie Roy said that Joni Lamb, the president of Dyer Television Network, did nothing about the sexual assault of her granddaughter between 2020 and 2021. Internal records and family sources stated that the warnings were ignored. The news got around fast. Joyce had been on Dyer for about 20 years. She stopped broadcasting there in January 2025 because she couldn't stay connected to a network that was facing such serious accusations. This problem was personal for her because of her past. She stepped back until the police could take care of the situation. And many people thought her choice was a strong one. She moved her show to TBN, Lifetime, and YouTube after leaving Dyer. These venues brought her daily lessons to more than 500,000 people every day. She lost roughly 10% of the people who used to watch her on Dyer, but her internet reach rose, especially among younger people. YouTube had live Q&A sessions, devotionals, and places for more open conversations. By the end of 2025, her shows were solidly on TBN and Lifetime, and her online presence was even stronger. The Daystar fight showed that there were bigger problems with the network itself. Jonathan Lamb, Joni's son, said she did something wrong with money, such using a Dyer credit card to pay for a $100,000 honeymoon in 2023. He also alleged that Joni made more than $1 million a year and kept payroll records secret. Dyer denied everything, saying that an outside company set her compensation. But court records indicated that Marcus Lamb had told her to pay her the same amount as both of their combined wages after he died. The family problems got worse after Jonathan was fired and more public fights broke out. Joyce thought about her own personal financial problems during these times, and she publicly called for tighter legislation to protect children in ministries. On November 14, 2025, her daily devotional was called Discipline Brings Reward. She talked about music, honesty, and being honest even when things are hard. She didn't say the day, but her words fit the circumstance. She told stories from the Bible about people who went through unfair things yet stayed strong in their faith. In just 1 week, more than 400,000 individuals downloaded the devotional. It moved those who were witnessing her go through another season of fighting. And once again, her ability to connect her own struggles with spiritual truths kept her audience close.